Senator Mike Lee of Utah back with us on the Common Sense Club in the Scott Hennen Show. Senator, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back.
So you're a no vote. Tell us why and what you hope to accomplish by getting either a filibuster going or enough folks to join you in killing this deal.
I'm a no vote because although I'm pleased at what this deal says about how we've evolved over the last 6 or 7 months. Remember 6 or 7 months ago, there were people in this town maintaining with a straight face, yeah, what we need is a new stimulus program. Although I'm pleased that we're now talking about whether, not just whether to cut, but how much, I believe that this plan doesn't do enough to move us in the right direction. Specifically, it approves about $2.5 trillion worth of new spending authority. Now, that is long-term indebtedness that will be paying off for a decade or more. But in the meantime, it doesn't really bring about any significant cuts that are immediate. Almost all the cuts that it plans on bringing about are cuts that will be implemented over the next decade or so when another Congress is in power, not this one. And so I think that's too little assurance that we will actually solve the problem. And as I explained in my book, The Freedom Agenda, the only way to fix this problem is through a constitutional amendment. That's how we reclaim our freedom and our economic prosperity, is through a balanced budget amendment of the Constitution. And
yet, in order to get the votes, both in the last deal that passed the House and also in this particular deal, there is, in fact, a provision in here that says we're going to vote on a balanced budget amendment. I love the timing of it because the closer to the election, the better. Supposedly there's some incentives in here for previous opponents that might possibly support it. You got to like that part of this proposal, don't you?
I do, and, I think that's fantastic that we'll be voting on it, but the fact that we'll get a vote on it isn't necessarily anything all that new. I mean, we could have had a vote on it this summer. We opted to delay it so that we could focus instead on the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act and get that done first. But a mere vote on a balanced budget amendment is very different than getting it passed. But what I've said in the case I make in the Freedom Agenda is that we ought to pass a balanced budget amendment out of Congress and submit it to the states for ratification before we raise the debt limit again.
I couldn't agree with you anymore, but as I understand it, if Obama wants his second round of debt ceiling increase, there has to be a balanced budget amendment sent to the states, right? So, yes, it requires a vote, but the vote has to pass for him to get wave 2 of $1.5 trillion in a debt limit increase.
No, that's not exactly true. There are several ways that he can get his second round of indebtedness approved. One of them is for this bipartisan joint committee of Congress to propose a sufficient number of cuts as to justify that new round of indebtedness, which would happen after that committee issues its recommendation if Congress, with the president's signature, ends up adopting those cuts. And so passing a balanced budget amendment is just one of several ways that new extended authority can be triggered.
But essentially, you could, I'm hopeful that this actually will convert some people here, some Democrats that previously have said they're for the balanced budget amendment, because they clearly don't want this debate. Obama doesn't want this debate again prior to the election. A lot of these Democrats don't want it, so they've claimed to be for a balanced budget amendment. And ultimately being for it simply says, states, it's up to you anyway. So really all you're doing is voting yes to say, let's have a national conversation about whether or not we need a constitutional change to require a balanced budget amendment. I couldn't agree with you anymore. If the Times don't call for this, I don't know what they call for. Do you like the chances of getting a balanced budget amendment sent to the states?
Yes, I actually do, even though there are a lot of naysayers even in Congress. I like the chances because 75% of the American people want a balanced budget amendment. And almost that many believe that we should not raise the debt limit without that kind of an approach, that is, without attaching it not only to some spending cuts, but also to a balanced budget amendment passing out of Congress. Now, the key thing here is looking forward. We need to keep focused on what kind of balanced budget amendment Congress ought to pass. I outlined some of the critical elements of a well-written balanced budget amendment in the Freedom Agenda. One of the things that I explain is that in addition to saying that Congress shouldn't spend more than it takes in a year, I also explain that Congress needs to be told that it shouldn't spend more than a specified percentage of gross domestic product in a year. When you limit Congress's ability to spend as a percentage of GDP, that makes it that much more certain that Congress won't continue its perpetual mission creep.
Give it teeth.
Regulating
Give it
every
teeth.
aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. Well, I know you've talked about a filibuster of this particular deal now that's making its way through Congress to avert this, the Armageddon that the administration claim is coming. Are you serious about a filibuster? What is that your plan right now?
Well, the way the filibuster rule works today in the Senate is if any member of the Senate objects to a lower threshold, then virtually any vote requires a 60-vote threshold, meaning you can't just pass with a simple majority of votes. You have to have 60 out of 100 voting for something. And I, along with a small handful of others, have made clear that we expect this vote, like almost all substantive votes in the Senate, must be approved by a 60% supermajority, as the filibuster rule requires. We have been assured that it will be a 60-vote margin.
All right. So in other words, if they're going to get it passed, they're going to have the 60 votes, and that's probably what they're gunning for to do. If you got your way and this didn't pass, what happens?
Well, if it didn't pass, then I would return the discussion back to either the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, which I introduced as the lead sponsor in the Senate, or something very similar to it, saying, look, we're happy to raise the debt limit, but Congress needs to pass the balanced budget amendment first, because it's a long-term indebtedness. We're putting people in debt who are not yet old enough to vote. We're even adding to the debt of people who, in some instances, have yet to be born. And we owe it to them to put a long-term solution into the mix as we're bringing on this long-term debt. Well,
I hope whatever we get more Mike Lees in the United States Congress, because that's the real long-term fix. Obama's got to go. We need more conservatives there to fix this for the long run. And I appreciate so much your tenacity in fighting there, Senator. Thanks for the time today. We appreciate the update.
Hey, thank you very much. It's good to talk to you.